When LBJ was considering joining JFK's ticket, he was famously counseled by former Vice President John Nance Garner that there wasn't much to be gained from the VP slot. As Garner colorfully put it, the vice presidency was, quote, not worth a bucket of warm piss. Now, Trump and J.D. Vance have both been desperately trying to convince themselves that's actually the case after Trump's own pick rapidly descended into heavy negative ratings. When asked if Vance was ready to serve on day one, Trump demurred before insisting that electorally, the vice presidential pick, it really doesn't matter. Vance has, in humiliating fashion, picked up the talking point of insisting that his existence is really utterly inconsequential. This is, of course, extreme cope, even if we're just talking electorally. Biden mattered for Obama's election, Palin mattered for McCain's loss, and Pence mattered for Trump's 2016 victory. As for LBJ, he took the job, of course, because he understood that to become vice president is to be placed on a likely path to power. Think George H.W. Bush running and winning after being VP for Reagan, Al Gore winning the Democratic nomination, of course, losing to Bush, and Kamala Harris's sudden elevation to the top of the ticket. But in my opinion, the significance of Tim Walz could be even more far-reaching than that. Walz's selection has added weight because of the amorphous nature of Kamala's own ideology, due to how Walz breaks the mold of typical Democratic politicians, and most of all, because his selection comes at a pivot point in history, when voters are desperate to shed the neoliberalism of the last 40 years, but have not yet settled on what might come next. In fact, Walz could just end up being the most consequential vice presidential pick since LBJ. Let me make the case. So, up to the morning of the announcement, I really personally couldn't quite believe Kamala might actually select Walz. Just think about it. Her choice came down to a literal Obama mimic in Josh Shapiro. And I'm not just talking about the cadence and mannerisms. He's got the legal background Obama and literally every other Democratic ticket has had for decades. Like Obama, he kept unions at arm's length, even mirroring Obama's school voucher and charter school-friendly approach. Shapiro was the darling of the Democratic consultant class and the pro-Israel donor set, and these are the types of groups that typically get their way. And Shapiro is the type of highly educated technocrat who Democratic elites have found absolutely irresistible. But in what came to me as an absolute shock, Kamala instead selected the most diverse pick the Democratic Party has perhaps ever made. He's diverse in that his entirely ordinary everyman life is rare to the point of near non-existence in Washington. A veteran who went to a state school before transitioning to become a public school teacher and football coach. This man literally just traveled to San Francisco for the first time ever this year. He wasn't a lawyer like Kamala and Obama, or a venture guy like Vance, or a billionaire like Trump. Walz literally doesn't even own any stocks, bonds, real estate, crypto investments of any kind outside of his state pensions. He's never had a book deal. He's never done a paid speaking gig. It's actually unbelievable and diametrically opposed to the current makeup of the Democratic Party. But Walz most clearly shatters the typical Democratic Party mold by actually being interested in delivering policy wins for working people rather than simply having power for the sake of having power. As he said last year, quote, "You don't win elections to bank political capital. You win elections to burn political capital and improve lives." Can you think of an ideology more foreign to a National Democratic Party obsessed with finding excuses for inaction than this stated commitment to taking the reins and throwing your weight around? The list of policy accomplishments Walz pushed through with a one-vote majority is quite astounding. Kyle's been touting this record for a while now. It includes universal free school meals, working-class tax rebates, free college for anyone earning under $80K, 12 weeks paid family and sick leave. On unions, he instituted sectoral bargaining for nursing home workers, banned non-compete clauses, and banned captive audience meetings. And this is really just the tip of the iceberg. The Minnesota Democrat Farm Labor Party called it the LFG agenda. Let's fucking go. Walz's House record, while overall more centrist-y, includes some real gems too. He actually stood up to Obama on TPP, fast-track authority. He appears to be sort of instinctively anti-war. He opposed both the Iraq War and the bombing of Syria. But it's not just Walz's break from the typical Dem mold of virtue signaling and inaction that matters both electorally and substantively. This agenda puts pretend pro-family populists like J.D. Vance and the supposedly newly pro-worker GOP in quite a bind. As Sohrab Ahmari wrote in a piece warning Republicans about Walz's populist strength based on his rock-solid pro-family record of achievement, quote, "It's the sort of legislation that self-proclaimed pro-family Republicans have too long resisted, even as they have lamented declining marriage and birth rates. There's a reason these types of Republicans resist simple and popular agenda items. It's because child tax credit, paid family leave, and the like, they're all coded as liberal. The only real consistent Republican ideology is worshiping Trump and owning the libs. That's why Vance, for example, can't just say he supports family leave or a child tax credit. Instead, he's got to appear edgy by ostentatiously offending a large group of people a la childless cat ladies. Or he's got to advocate for some bizarre, unconstitutional harebrained scheme like letting parents cast more votes than non-parents. Trump, for his part, doesn't even really pretend to care about any of this. In other words, Democrats are finally showing up to play in the battle for what comes after neoliberalism, and Republicans, outflanked now on populism, find themselves flailing around talking about tampons, definitely trying to recreate some swift boat magic from 2004, hurling around accusations about anti-Semitic microaggressions, and inventing Olympic gender controversies. Which, yes, to most voters, that all seems pretty weird. With another candidate and another time, Walz's record as the vice presidential pick might be as important as that bucket of warm piss. But this is not a normal time, and Kamala, she's not a normal candidate. A look at her long history in the public eye leaves one fairly convinced she has no real ideology, no real core beliefs. There seems to be no commitment on which she won't bend, no principle on which she won't budge. She has sat for no interviews since Biden's dropout. She has hastily dropped previous policy commitments that she personally found to be unhelpful. She appears easily moved by whoever happens to have her ear, and now, Tim Walz, he's got her ear. She could have picked the Obama clone, and instead she chose FDR in a camo hat. Now, this should not trick you into thinking Kamala is herself secretly pining to be FDR. Actually, it indicates something that to me is far more important and far more exciting. For the ambitious, power-seeking politician with no discernible ideological commitments, it is more politically expedient to seek out the modern New Dealer than the technocratic neolib. Kamala reportedly did extensive poll testing before making her choice. Ruthless operators, Obama and Pelosi, both reportedly lined up behind Walz as well. Yes, Kamala may have enjoyed his affable demeanor and non-threatening answers as opposed to the blind ambition oozing out of Shapiro. But ultimately, she and her team made a hard-nosed, data-driven political decision. And for one of the first times ever, that calculus led to an unambiguously good and populist result. Personally, I can't think of anything that is more exciting. As for that path to power, I gotta tell you, today I think Kamala and Walz do defeat Trump and Vance. The vibes, as they say, are off the charts. But whether she loses or wins, Walz is now in the pole position to be the next Democratic nominee. And having Walz as opposed to Shapiro or Mark Kelly et al. Setting the course for the future of the Democratic Party is actually quite consequential. Instead of a lawyer rerunning the Obama playbook, we've got a Midwestern populist trained in the Paul Wellstone School, so disinterested in the success of the stock market that he literally doesn't own a single security. It doesn't mean the battle is won, far from it. The U.S. is still aiding a genocide. The world sits on the precipice of a massive war. Cracks are emerging in an economy that was already far too geared towards the wealthy and Wall Street ghouls and billionaires. They still brazenly throw their cash around to extract political favors. All of that's still true. There is nothing inevitable about progress. But the whiff of possibility is in the air, and that, frankly, is far more than I was expecting just a month ago. Now, in 2008, I naively believed in the promise of hope and change, the idea one guy could come out of nowhere and be totally transformational, charting a new course for the country. Everything about that political lens was dead wrong. Obama was just Bill Clinton politics in a cool modern disguise. And I now believe that the political moment is more important than the individual personality. Walz's ascent, coming on the heels of some Biden shifts towards domestic populism, is evidence that perhaps the era has shifted, that the anti-populism practiced by neoliberal technocrats is on the wane, and a new logic is on the way in. That the best of the Biden administration on unions and antitrust and industrial policy wasn't a blip, but a beginning. That the labor movement is coming back to life and exerting real pressure and influence along with other left organizing like the uncommitted movement. So though you may find it cringe, I do find myself once again filled with hope. Not for a savior, though, because what is most important about Walz isn't who he is, but a possible shift he represents. And Saagar, it is because Kamala is...
Hey guys, if you want to see what I had to say to Krystal's monologue, not just this one, all of them, going back to the very beginning, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com.